The jungle welcomed them with an eerie silence, as if the very air was watching their every move. The four friends, Mark, Sarah, Ben, and Lisa, arrived at the edge of the jungle just after dawn, brimming with excitement and a sense of adventure that tinged their voices with eager anticipation. Mark, an experienced trekker, had promised them an unforgettable trip into a part of the wilderness untouched by human interference. The thick canopy above allowed only sparse shafts of sunlight to filter through, creating an ethereal glow over the dense greenery. Ferns brushed against their legs, and the scent of earth and vegetation filled the air. As they walked, Mark's confident voice carried through the jungle, pointing out interesting plants and traces of wildlife. He was thrilled to share his love for exploration, pausing occasionally to explain the rarity of this ecosystem. Sarah, who worked in a fast-paced office environment, savored each moment away from her screens and the constant demands of her job. Ben trailed behind, often skeptical of what he deemed overly mystical nature, but he couldn't deny the beauty of the place. Lisa, the quietest among them, stayed to the side, her gaze fixed on the jungle. There was something about this place that felt different, ancient and powerful, almost sentient. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, but she pushed it down, hoping it was just her imagination. The deeper they ventured, the quieter the jungle became. Bird calls and the rustling of small creatures faded until only the sound of their footsteps remained. They reached a clearing by late afternoon, where they decided to set up camp. The area was surrounded by towering trees and dense undergrowth, as though it had been carved out by nature just for them. It felt secluded, peaceful even, and as night began to fall, Mark built a fire in the center. They gathered around it, hoping the warm glow would calm their nerves and bring them comfort. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows on their faces as they shared stories and laughter. Mark, always one to joke about spirits and legends, began telling stories of the jungle, of ancient people who believed the trees were filled with spirits and that those who wandered too far might be claimed by them. He laughed, expecting them to do the same, but his words hung heavily in the air. Sarah forced a laugh, though it felt hollow. She could sense something beyond the firelight, something that was listening. As the night wore on, the jungle seemed to close in around them, and an unspoken tension began to rise. Lisa kept glancing into the darkness, her gaze darting from shadow to shadow, convinced she saw movement at the edge of the fire's reach. Ben, noticing her anxiety, laughed it off, telling her she was letting her imagination run wild. But even he glanced over his shoulder a few times, as if to reassure himself there was nothing there. Eventually, they all turned in for the night, but sleep did not come easily. Every creak of wood, every rustle of leaves, seemed to carry a sinister intent. Sarah lay awake, her senses heightened, straining to hear anything unusual. Just as she began to drift off, a soft whisper drifted to her from the darkness outside her tent. Her name was called, faint and breathy, just barely audible but unmistakable. Sarah. Her heart raced, and she held her breath, listening. There was no second call, but the memory of the voice lingered, chilling her to the core. She lay still, too afraid to move, feeling the sensation of unseen eyes watching her from just beyond the tent wall. When dawn finally arrived, she mentioned the whisper to the others. Mark brushed it off as a dream, insisting that the tension was getting to them. Ben smirked, making a joke about jungle spirits. But even he grew quiet when Lisa admitted she felt the same thing, a cold, haunting presence that seemed to linger around them, watching their every move. They ate breakfast in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, as the jungle around them seemed to press closer. When they tried to follow their trail markers to continue exploring, they were horrified to discover that every path looped back to the campsite. Each attempt led them in circles, and soon, frustration gave way to panic. The once exciting jungle now felt like a labyrinth, holding them in its grasp. Mark did his best to calm the group, but there was a palpable sense of dread as they realized they were trapped with no clear way out. By the time night fell, their fear was overwhelming. They huddled together around the fire, each on edge, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. The whispers returned, drifting through the trees like faint echoes. This time, they heard all of their names, each called with a sorrowful longing, as though spoken by someone lost and desperate. Shadows moved at the edge of their vision, shapes shifting and melting into the darkness whenever they tried to look directly at them. Sleep was impossible. Each of them lay awake, listening to the chorus of voices, feeling the cold grip of fear. As dawn broke, they were exhausted, their nerves frayed and tempers short. Mark suggested moving deeper into the jungle, hoping to find another route out. They followed him, driven by desperation, and soon stumbled upon a set of ancient ruins hidden among the trees. Moss and vines clung to the crumbling stones, which seemed out of place, as if they belonged to another world entirely. Among the ruins, they found remnants of a campsite, torn clothing, old boots, and a journal with brittle, yellowed pages. The entries chronicled the journey of another group who had entered the jungle years ago. As they read, a sickening realization settled over them. The stories in the journal mirrored their own experiences, the feeling of being watched, the whispers, the unending paths that led them back to the same spot. The final entry was hastily scrawled, barely legible, and it sent a chill through them all. The jungle doesn't let anyone leave. They stood in horrified silence, the weight of the words sinking in like a stone. The jungle was not merely alive, it was a trap, a place that claimed all who dared enter its depths. That night, the whispers grew louder, filling the air with voices that sounded both near and far. Shadows gathered around them, pressing closer, and the jungle seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Mark, growing frantic, studied the carvings on the stones, convinced that they were part of a ritual. Desperate to escape, he proposed that they attempt the ritual, hoping it might appease the spirits and grant them freedom. They gathered offerings, stones, leaves, and trinkets they thought might be significant. As they arranged them around the ruins, the jungle fell silent, and the shadows seemed to watch with bated breath. Following the instructions from the journal, they recited words of respect and apology, their voices trembling as they addressed the unseen forces around them. The shadows circled closer, their forms becoming clearer, ghostly figures with hollow eyes and faces twisted in anguish. Each of them felt a cold touch, like a hand reaching out from the void. The jungle spun around them, and the whispers became a mournful chant, voices overlapping in a ghostly harmony. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupted from the altar, and the shadows vanished. When they opened their eyes, the first light of dawn revealed a clear path leading out of the jungle. They stumbled forward, weak and disoriented, desperate to escape the haunted forest that had nearly claimed them. But as they emerged, each of them heard a faint whisper, as though the jungle itself was bidding them farewell, a reminder that, while they had left, a part of them would forever remain within the depths of the jungle.